Thank you. Hey guys, thanks everyone for being here. Nice to be speaking with you all. I'll just introduce myself quickly and then you guys can do the same and we can get into it. I'm Rennick, I'm the founding partner of Stratos. We're an early stage venture fund primarily focused on infrastructure, but we've done a lot of DeFi over the years. I've personally been investing in DeFi for 6 years now. I was a seed investor in the Compound Finance seed round, so go back pretty far on DeFi. So when I made that investment, it was before DeFi was even called DeFi. So it's awesome to see where the space has come today, and looking forward to learning more from you guys.
Hi, I'm Jacob. I'm co-founder and CEO of 3Jane. Our goal is to unlock crypto derivatives yield on EigenLayer. We achieve this through means of financial engineering. Basically, you can collateralize options contracts with restaked Ethereum, and by doing so, you can generate real ETH yield on top of EigenLayer, and then as well as earning all the yield from the AVSs.
Hi everyone, my name is Kai Tai, co-founder and CEO of Yalla. So Yalla is a liquidity protocol natively built on BTC, and the idea is allowing BTC holders to unleash this liquidity and then having their own strategy to earn yields across the whole ecosystem. So it's not necessarily on Bitcoin only. You can go on ETH, or the SVM, EVM, etc. For myself, I started in crypto in 2017 and been back and forth between an entrepreneur and an investor. So Yalla is my second baby.
Hey everyone, my name is Manuel. I'm head of strategy at Tokamak, and we're now developing a new product called Autopilot. It's an LP aggregator, and our core focus is to connect liquidity across pools. I know that the previous panel was talking a lot about infrastructure, but our core is really the demand side and providing a new way to LP in DeFi.
Cool. Well, before we get into more detailed discussion about where things are today, I thought it would be interesting to ask you all, how is the landscape of DeFi today different from DeFi summer and the 2021 bull market? And you guys can go in any order, just go ahead.
I guess that I can start. So there was a big tectonic shift, right, that happened, and that was the merge. In my opinion, that's what really changed the introduction of yield-bearing assets and basically being able to access a scalable form of yield. We saw Balancer, for example, taking the lead in terms of yield-bearing DEXs. We saw then money markets opting into this trend and entering leverage staking. And this was really the spark for LSDFi that really preceded LRTFi now. And people tend to think, well, the yield marketplace on Pendle only really arose with the restaking space, but that's far from the truth. I was having a lot of discussions with a lot of different LST protocols, and they were all already focused on integrating their own tokens into Pendle. A cool shift that I've witnessed is this transformation from closed and vertically integrated platforms. And I love Aave, but for example, if you look at the shared pool model, it's very hard to generalize this to LRTs. All of these LRTs, they're going to have different underlying AVSs. If you start thinking about slashing conditions, even if it's a very simple one like downtime, you start to understand that there are a lot of different profiles and risks. So this new field of open and modular platforms like Morpho or LSTs that are marketplaces like Stakewise V3 where anyone can launch an LST, or even modular platforms like Mello on Symbiotic, they're really unlocking this modularity piece that I'm very excited to see how it goes forward.
One thing I did notice, at the beginning there were really like 4 horses of DeFi. Like you had Uniswap for LPing, you had Aave for money markets. So you had like the very foundational primitives. And then you started to see sort of like more exotic financial primitives built on top that had similar analogs. Like Pendle is a great example of like interest rate swaps, which is now like repurposed into implied yield swaps. And then Ribbon, which I was running, grew that up to hundreds of millions of TVL. We were doing structured products. You started to see an evolution of more, I mean, you could call it niche, but more exotic financial primitives on top. And then a second thing I noticed, which is what I'm now coining as EigenFi, which is sort of like emerging between like infrastructure yield with DeFi, which is similar to what you were saying around the merge. And that was also interesting to notice. So there's sort of like an integration going on between EigenLayer and DeFi, which didn't exist before, similar with staking yield and Lido, which is also cool to see.
Yeah, I'd like to add some colors about the type of users and the investors. So I think DeFi last cycle was more like a discovery, where they have this set the rules for best practices and the playbook for this one. If you look at the investors and retail investors for the last round, they are more degen, and now the investors have higher expectations. So we have to measure the depth of this community, the momentum of the community, and of course the background of all the founders. So I think we are heading in a good direction, and this is to set the pathway to more innovation.
Great. Yeah, I think those are all good answers. I guess one other thing that I would say is just interest in DeFi, interest in Bitcoin as an asset to do something with. Obviously, it's following in the footsteps of EigenLayer and ETH, but that definitely wasn't of interest in 2020, 2021, at least from where I was sitting. So that's encouraging as well, just given the scale there. But yeah, one of the kind of threads between what all of you were saying is, you're creating a lot more diversity in terms of the products and things you can do in DeFi, but then also you're kind of fragmenting liquidity, and you're creating a need. The very, very primitive, like early money markets, just had liquidity for the largest assets really, and that was it. And there wasn't necessarily the same level of need to enable people to permissionlessly create pools. And we've been working on that for a while, but I think one of the issues before that has been able to be really successful is just overall TVL. Just need to scale the space overall, because once you fragment the TVL too much, you get this left tail, and you can't really do anything. There's no scale. So I think as we're seeing the space grow, that's going to enable a lot of these more exotic and kind of unique products. And so to that end, although obviously ETH is a massive asset, like how do you guys think about restaking and LRTs fitting into this and where we are today? Obviously, I think it's one of the big unlocks we're all expecting to see.
So the way I think about it is you have a restaked asset. There are two ways of earning yield on it. The first way, which is the original reason why this whole thing exists, is AVS is generating yield for stakers, for restakers. And the second, which is 3Jane is building out, is something called derivatives yield, which is leveraging financial primitives as a means of earning yield. So in one, you are earning yield in exchange for slashing risk, and in the other, you're earning yield from financial risk. So the derivatives yield is a much more tractable problem than getting a bunch of AVSs to start generating like hundreds of millions of revenue for stakers. And so we've been generating around 7 to 8% in real ETH yields on top of restaked ETH assets, which allows people to farm their points and wait for AVSs to start generating yield, and at the same time get exposure to a huge suite of DeFi primitives.
Where's your yield coming from?
We sell out of the money call options. So these are covered calls.
So someone who's restaking ETH
Yeah.
is using that to hedge their ETH dollar risk, basically.
You can use it as a means of hedging. You can also use it as a means of speculating on on the ETH price. So yeah, so you take restaked ETH asset, which is earning AVS yield. Then you redeposit it into 3Jane. We package it, collateralize it, and sell deep out of the money call options to a network of market makers. And then we accrue option premiums, and that's a means of generating ETH yield on top of restaked assets in exchange for financial risk.
So let's say I'm restaking ETH, and maybe I've got it in a collection of AVSs where my total yield on the ETH itself is I'm getting my base staking yield plus my restaking yield. So maybe it's 3 plus 5. I don't know. Maybe I'm making 8%. And then I can go to you and I can add another, 7 to 8% on top of that?
Right. So if you annualize the yield you get from option premiums, so you'd get 8 plus 8. And the reason why that works is because restaked ETH ends up tracking the price of ETH at the end of the day. So that's why it is a perfect collateral for options contracts, because the option buyer is not concerned that the options contract is insufficiently collateralized.
But you can basically yes, that makes total sense. But my point is, you can make something like 16% annualized yield on top of whatever the US dollar returns on ETH are, assuming you set up your option strategy correctly so that you're not getting called.
Right. So 3Jane, you're getting staking yield plus AVS yield 1 through N plus selling options contracts on top.
Got it. Okay, I want to come back to that discussion, but I want to give Manuel a chance to talk about what they built.
Yeah, so my pleasure. We've built an LP aggregator, and you touch on a very important point, fragmentation. This fragmentation doesn't exist just on money markets. We talk a lot about L2 fragmentation, but the current status quo whenever you provide liquidity is that you deploy funds into a pool, and this liquidity becomes isolated from other pools. And what I mean by this is that it is insensitive to changes in rates until manual intervention occurs. So imagine that you're an LP that wants to have exposure to a correlated asset class like ETH-LST pools, ETH-LRT pools, or even stablecoin pools. What we've developed is a system that is going to autonomously monitor a set of pools, and it's going to autonomously rebalance liquidity across different DEXs in order to ensure an optimal LP allocation over the long term. We do this through a structure that we call auto pools. These auto pools, they are ERC-4626 vaults, and you can configure them with any underlying option set that you want, and then Autopilot will essentially consider these as the legible destinations for liquidity. The really cool thing is that whenever you deposit into an auto pool, like for example, Auto LRT, it's going to be one of the 2 auto pools that we'll have live at launch. You get a receipt token back, and you're getting still access to the ETH staking yield for securing the Ethereum network. You're getting the ETH restaking yield, and you're aggregating liquidity across pools over Curve, Balancer, etc., and tapping into the trading fees and incentives that that layer generates. But I think that the really cool thing that we're unlocking here is that we're creating automated liquidity networks. And this composable receipt token is then something that you can use across DeFi. And one important question that people usually ask me is, okay, so you create this auto pool, right? Which is just a pool with a lot of pools inside. But how can you expect every single LP to fit into this risk preference? And our answer for that is that we're going to enable permissionless creation of auto pools, meaning that we're also going to allow LPs to essentially express individual risk preferences and determine what's the network of liquidity that they want exposure to. So, in a very short summary, connecting liquidity across pools. That's what we're doing.
So, what do you think is the possible annualized yield you can generate on what you've built?
It's only going to depend on the pools that we include in an auto pool. So, again, if you have, for example, an auto pool that includes 10 different destinations, what you're going to get is, over time, an outperformance versus any of the constituent pools. So it's always going to be relative on the option set.
So how do you think that compares to what Jake's been talking about?
I think that it's not really comparable. If you look at the addressable market for liquidity provision, it's a completely different market versus this type of derivatives. And ultimately, I think that we're working on a primitive that is just LP-centric.
So I think that this kind of segues into, how do you attract regular people into DeFi? And, before we go there, I want to give KT a chance to talk about what he's built and how this actually, compares to what you guys have built.
Yeah, I think there's two key words for us. One is trustless, and second one is control. So Manuel told connecting liquidity. We are also connecting liquidity across the whole ecosystem. The way we think about it is we do over-collateralization to mint a stablecoin. And this stablecoin is used as a tool to bridge this liquidity from one ecosystem to the other. And compared to the existing restaking rewards or the ones you can get from pools, we like to give our user the flexibility and control to decide where to stake, for how long, and their risk exposure. So let's say a user A is risk adverse, then they might stake on low risk, low APY pools. Whereas if user B is a degen, then this person may go to pools that could yield up to 30% APY. So it is really up to the users to do their yield strategy. So it could be detra neutral, it could be up only, depending on them. But the beauty of it is everything is decentralized, and this stablecoin is meant to be on any other ecosystem than Bitcoin.
So theoretically, I could take my BTC, mint a stablecoin through you, swap it for ETH, and then go to Manuel's protocol or Jake's protocol and get yield on top of that. So it sounds like yours is very configurable, most applicable to people who maybe want to unlock their Bitcoin without selling it, but also are very sophisticated in terms of being able to decide what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. The word we want to remove is passive income. So we want the user to be a major actor of their earnings.
Okay, so the main question here, so just to take a step back, I spent some time in TradFi when I started my career. If you came to me and you said you could make 16% annualized yields on a liquid asset, I'd be like, what kind of crazy shit are you doing? Like this, you must be taking so much risk. It doesn't make any sense. So the awesome thing about crypto is, these yields actually exist. We can argue, what is the base source of the yield? I think, when you look at LRTs, it comes from the AVS is actually generating token value and paying that out to the restakers, which is, I think, a separate conversation. But I think just as important is, how do you get someone who's maybe not a super sophisticated DeFi person? How do you compare what each of you have built, and how do you actually collect that liquidity in a way that's user friendly?
I think that's really the perfect question for what we built. When you think about providing liquidity, unless you are a DeFi native, you're not going to be able to tell me what's the difference between a gyroscope concentrated liquidity pool, a stable swap pool, Mavericks concentrated liquidity with dynamic orders, right? All of them are quite complex just to understand by itself. In addition to this, there is also a very large selection of pools. APRs are constantly varying all the time, etc. So what Autopilot is, and it's self-explanatory, it's essentially automating and abstracting all of this complexity and working as an LP aggregator. Comparison that I'd like to use for what we're building, and it's going to be launched in the next couple of months, is that before DEX aggregators were created, traders had to manually compare quotes across different exchanges. What we're trying to do is something similar, but to LPs, meaning that the LP should only be concerned with the pools that they want to have included and a protocol should be taking care of the automation of liquidity across the different AMM models, etc., in order to get optimal returns. And you ask, where does the yield come from? The outperformance yield that Autopilot provides, it's basically the variance across all of these yields from these pools. And this is what the network of liquidity is, and that's why I'm so excited about it, because this is a problem that I have as a user. You know, when you're inspired by something that you need to solve for yourself, it feels more rewarding.
How are you allocating across the pools? Do you have some sort of algorithm, or what have you developed?
Okay, I can explain very briefly the architecture. There are four main components. You have an auto pool, which again, it's just a vault where you say the destinations that you want to have exposure to. Then you have a stat system. This is the system responsible for looking at all the pools integrated in this auto pool and essentially processing and storing this information. Then there are two components responsible for proposing liquidity rebalances and deciding liquidity rebalances. So one of them, it's a solver that will propose these rebalances, right? And now with intent-based architectures, I think that everyone is already familiar with solvers. And then there is a strategy backing each single auto pool. So the solver proposes to the auto pool, oh, we should rebalance from pool A to pool B, and the strategy is going to verify if any of its constraints are violated or not. If everything is valid, the liquidity will be moved across pools.
Very cool. We actually invested in a project in early 2021 that wanted to do something similar to that, but it was just too early. So it's really cool to see that coming to life.
That was one of the questions that I've been asked before, which was, why doesn't this exist yet? And I think that the real answer is, first of all, there's a lot of technology that didn't exist back then, technology that we're using right now. And secondly, the addressable market was simply not large enough, because nobody cares about an LP aggregator if you're talking about volatile pools. But suddenly, the addressable market for correlated trading pairs, such as people that want exposure to stable coins or exposure to ETH through either ETH LSTs or ETH LRTs, it grew to billions and billions. So that's one of the reasons why now it's the time to build something like Autopilot, and the reason why it only makes sense now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would love to learn more about the infrastructure that you're using to do it, but I think that's, we'll save that for later. KT, do you want to talk about how you think about users and aggregation?
Yeah, the idea for us is not creating liquidity fragmentation. So that means we don't want to go and compete against the TVL war that some of the other partners or actors has been playing. The idea behind it is people are using our platform as a means to transfer this liquidity of Bitcoin to the rest of the ecosystem. So Ethereum, Solana, you name it. And we don't want that liquidity to be stagnant. And it's rather better liquidity when it has velocity. So velocity is what we are looking for, and there's no point for users to just stake and leave it as it is without playing around with this liquidity. So we are a completely transparent and no string attached platform, so there's no liquidity remaining stagnant on Yalla.
Jake?
The question is, what are you doing to attract users?
Basically, how do you make it easier for users who maybe are not super degen on-chain to make it easy to access the yields you're providing?
Yeah, the whole idea of 3Chain is a vault where the entire structure is abstracted away. So all that user does is deposits. So there's $15 billion not stuck, but EigenLayer is a black hole. There's like $15 billion on there. Points are going to zero. No one's making any money anymore. 3Chain is basically allows you to take all of your idle capital, EigenLayer capital, deposit into 3Chain, and we're generating 8% in ETH yield for you by selling these deep out of the money call options. And that entire structure is abstracted away. The collateralization, the auctioning, the selling of the options, the accrual of the options premiums. So it's very simple. It's like one click.
Cool. All right, we're past time. I just want to ask you guys all one quick question. What is the thing that you're most excited about in DeFi over the next couple years? Just quick answers.
Automating liquidity provision. Manual LPs are going to become auto LPs.
Nice, okay. KT?
More engagement of BTC rather than being in cold wallets.
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to the verifiable cloud.
Elaborate.
So, I mean, the whole idea behind EigenLayer is it's the verifiable cloud. I want to see how much of the entire world we can sort of settle on EigenLayer. How much of it is going to be stuck in crypto? How much of it can cross the chasm into traditional finance?
Cool. Yeah, all exciting things, all real. It's going to be a very exciting couple years. Congrats to all you guys on what you've built. It's awesome.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.